where are you on the Mandalorian?
I've watched all 3 episodes so far.
All right,
So
it's fucking amazing.
yes, I am so happy about it. I don't know if you've seen my post about it, like the first when I watched the first episode on Facebook, but
On Facebook, yes, I did. Yes.
yeah, it is a total like spaghetti western mixed right into the Star Wars universe. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's great. I mean, I yeah. So
Yeah. So it it's completely different, and I think that that's a good thing, and I think that that's what Star Wars needed, and it's really kind of a hybrid. And we're going to talk here tonight about it, and then we're going to get into some Game of Thrones news and talk about the news with the prequels and some of our thoughts there. But you know, it's the closest thing I've seen, and I'm not a huge fan of the Star Wars cartoons. I've never like they were great. Like I
yeah,
enjoyed them, but they were never comparable to me to the films, to the movies. This to me though is kind of a hybrid between those two. It's got a lot of
yeah.
the movies, the movie elements in it. It's got a lot of the cartoons, like the latest scene when those Mandalorians come out. Spoiler alert!
Yeah.
Come out and help the Mandalorian escape the bounty hunter guild. That's straight out of like a episode of Rebels or
This is who we are.
a video. Yeah, this is who we are, or a video game.
Yeah.
This is the way.
Or yeah, this is the way. Yeah.
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 Easy to mess up. No, I'm really enjoying it. To me, it feels kind of back to the Star Wars roots, which are, deeply embedded in samurai films, and spaghetti westerns are purposely styled after samurai films more than they are like John Ford westerns of like the 30s and 40s and 50s.
I didn't realize that. That's really cool. Yeah.
If you think about the like Shogun era of Japan, it was a very medieval period. But to Japan, that became a cultural milestone just the same way for America, the West and cowboys and gunslingers were.
Yeah.
So while they don't necessarily share a lot of the same time period elements, they share a lot of the same plot and character motivations. You usually have a single gunslinger or a single samurai warrior kind of alone in the wilderness, traveling, fighting, taking bounties, taking jobs, saving people. In those storytelling elements, they share a lot of similarities.
See, and I mean, The Last Samurai. No, I'm just playing. But yeah, I mean that is a mix. But no, I don't think that's really an accurate story, or a true one. I don't know. It seemed like it was based off anyways, whatever. But
well, there is according to Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, the co-writers, co-creators of the series. There is a samurai story called Lone Wolf and Cub that they specifically used as kind of a tentpole for this story, and that
cool.
sees a samurai warrior take on protecting a child, and obviously that's what's happening in this story, but it leans much more to a western in my opinion, with the landscape and the bounty element. The Clint Eastwood Man with No Name trilogies, where the guy doesn't have a name, he doesn't say much, he even though the Mandalorian is wearing a mask, he emotes pretty much one or two emotions through it, and so that it definitely looks and feels more like a western.
That is something that I've written in my notes that I'm super impressed by is how they're able to emote without seeing faces. But before I jump into that, I think the reason it feels so much like a hybrid to like the cartoons, the Rebels and the Clone Wars, those cartoons and the movies is because I think the writer is involved, right?
Dave Filoni, yes.
Yeah, and then also I looked at the IMDb credits, and George Lucas has credits on for writing on 8 episodes, and I'm so happy that they actually brought him in to help write this. Like, because I mean, he gets a lot of stuff that it's his. I mean, he created this world, but there is a lot of stuff he tends to like throw in there that's off-putting. But it's very nice to see what it's still nice to see him involved and having people listening to his creative thoughts because it feels so much more like a fleshed out Star Wars universe because of him and then his restraints too. I'm sure there's he doesn't have the final say anymore, so it kind of it's it seems kind of sad, but at the same time, I think we're getting better content because of it as well.
Yes. So, first of all, to the listeners out there, the writer that we're talking about is Dave Filoni, and Dave. I mean, you can absolutely say this. He is George Lucas's protege, and so the backstory on him, and there's actually an article that was written by Anthony Breznican, who used to write for Entertainment Weekly. He now writes for Vanity Fair. And he and Joanna Robinson, who's a writer for Vanity Fair and big in the Game of Thrones fandom, they're doing a podcast following The Mandalorian. But right before the Mandalorian TV show dropped, Breznican released a story, a background story on Dave Filoni. And so the story basically goes, Dave Filoni grew up in Pittsburgh, which is just about 40 minutes north of where I live. He was big into Star Wars. He was big into animation, all the kinds of different content that we all know and love. He goes to LA. I think he may have worked on The Last Airbender. That may have been where Lucas saw him. So
Okay.
Lucas's people call him, say, come up to Skywalker Ranch. George wants to talk to you. Dave Filoni's like, what the fuck? I mean, this is like my hero. We're like, why is he bringing me up here? Lucas brings him up there and says, I want to make a Star Wars cartoon. I want to focus on the Clone Wars, and having watched your work, I think you're the best for this. And so instantly, Filoni became Lucas's right hand and kind of built the animation juggernaut that was Star Wars, and that the animation juggernaut that became the Star Wars cartoons. And he really took over the reins of Star Wars when Lucas decided to leave, and he's been involved in the story groups for The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and Rogue One and Solo. But this is his first time, besides the animation, really directing and writing and producing something live action. So yeah, you were right. He has George Lucas's ear probably just as much as Kathleen Kennedy does.
Which is awesome to hear because I also heard too. I didn't like look into this, but I also heard that he has experience in writing for live action stuff too, and he knows how to do that. That's kind of so like because a lot of people who write for animation write a certain way. A lot of people for live action write a certain way, and then it gets way more complicated because TV writing for like TV sitcoms is way different from writing for movies, and then you got your series. But he's pretty well versed in that, which I think that's one of the things that's making this TV show work for me. It it almost feel like watching these 3 episodes, I feel like, yeah, this is watching the Clone Wars. This is watching Rebels. It's just live action. And then you have Jon Favreau, who directed the first 2 Iron Men, which launched a whole, it launched the MCU to what
Absolutely.
so and with the news of Kevin Feige taking over, I forget what he got, but he's like basically overseeing Star Wars now too, right?
No, I think
Or he's involved,
that's,
but
yeah, that's going to happen. Some people were theorizing he's going to produce and create either a new movie or a new trilogy or a new series or something.
well, I know he got a new position too recently.
So yeah, I think the way I've heard it is twofold. One, that when he stepped out of the MCU, and I guess you could put that in quotes because he doesn't really step out of the MCU, but he stepped out to make the 2 Spider-Man movies, Homecoming and Far From Home, which were under the Marvel banner, but it wasn't necessarily housed in Marvel Disney Studios.
Hey, Travis, you had a lag spike right after you said Marvel banner.
Okay. So that was under the Marvel banner, not necessarily, directly under Disney's control, because I think Sony still had technically control of Spider-Man, but it was a joint anyways.
Yeah.
The way the story goes is he realized, hey, I can kind of step out of my overall duties of Marvel because I've set all these things up and I've got all these directors and writers and producers in place, and I can kind of play. So some people were saying that enticed him to step into Star Wars because he loves Star Wars and he wants to produce and create something within the Star Wars universe.
Yeah.
And other people were saying, look how successful he's been. It was probably the Disney executives that said, hey, you need to step in there and give Star Wars the structure that Marvel has.
Yeah.
And, which I think is interesting because, we've had, when The Rise of Skywalker comes out in just a month, which is crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah.
There will have been, one Star Wars movie a year for 5 years. And, a lot of people have complained that that's too much content because, I remember getting in discussions and debates with people about, this isn't Marvel. The content in Marvel is just constantly rolling out. So on the one hand, you're like, does Star Wars really need the structure that Feige could offer? Or is this Feige saying, hey, I'm going to pump out the Marvel movies here, and then I'm going to give Star Wars, a lot of extra time and extra treatment. I think it'll be very interesting to see where it all goes with him. If it is just one movie or a series of movies, or if he is going to create a little more. I think one of the good rumors also that's happening is, I just saw it a couple of days ago that Filoni and Favreau are going to have more say in the future of Star Wars. So, are they going to take over? Are they going to take over Lucasfilm, or are they going to become more intimately involved in Lucasfilm? I don't know. I mean, I think once The Rise of Skywalker comes out,
I think it's going to be fresh. I think it's going to be a fresh start after that comes out.
Yeah,
it's not going to.
I think the first of the year, a little after that, you're gonna hear some announcements from Disney and Lucasfilm saying, this is the future for Star Wars, and you might see some new names and new faces at Lucasfilm.
Yeah, I think I've heard that everyone said this about the MCU that we don't need all these tie-ins. It's never gonna work. They said that at the beginning, and I don't think I really even gave a shit really at that time. Like I
Right.
just, I wasn't involved in comic book movies. I didn't really, I'd watch them. Like I've watched every
Right.
single
Right.
Marvel movie, and I wasn't a big fan until after maybe I watched Civil War. Like I'd watched them all up, like I'd watched every single one of them, but I didn't really become like a fan until that movie because they introduced Spider-Man, and then like the Avengers were fighting each other, and like I just thought it. And so with Disney Plus, because I got Disney Plus now, I went back and like watched some of like the Captain. I watched a lot of the Captain America movies,
Yeah.
and I watched Iron Man 2 because I think I've only ever watched that like once. And
Not that great.
yeah, I don't know. I loved it. I think that's
Is
like
that the one with Mickey Rourke?
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I really liked it, but I mean, everyone has their own taste. I went back and revisited it, and I'm like, I don't understand why people don't like this movie
Sure.
because it feels like the first like crossover movie. Because you
Yeah.
introduce Nick Fury, Black Widow, and then Coulson has more of a role in that. But then I know everyone goes to Winter Soldier as the best Captain America movie, and I love that movie, and I love Civil War. Um, but I think the most well written and like one of the most fun movies is the first Captain America. I
Yes.
mean,
Yes. I agree with you.
I think that's my favorite one. And it's a toss up between It's a toss up between the first one right now and Civil War, but Civil War feels more like an Avengers movie. But anyways, that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
completely sidetracked thing. But I feel like Star Wars might need that just to clean up some of the baggage that comes with it. I mean, I am a huge fan of the well, now I don't sound like a huge fan because I can't think of the name, but the last Star Wars movie,
The Last Jedi.
yeah, The Last Jedi. I
Yeah.
like it. I
Well,
don't,
technically, Solo was the last Star Wars movie,
and
but the last saga movie is what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, Saga, and I even liked Solo for what it was. It wasn't
Hmm.
there's things that I don't like about it.
There's
Um,
there's a lot of Solo in the Mandalorian, though.
yeah, yeah, and
A lot of Rogue One there too. I mean,
yeah,
it again. It pulls all of these Star Wars elements, which I think is what makes it great.
yeah, and like I just as but I feel like with this last one, it's going to be done. It's going to be over. I feel like people are going to, you know, quit complaining that it's too SJW or whatever, and it's just going to be a new slate. Which it does annoy me because like I feel I like The Last Jedi way more than I do The Force Awakens. I just
I agree.
because I'm like I understand, like I still love the Force Awakens, but I mean it's just A New Hope just with better special effects, and you kill off Solo, and like I don't know, it's just, and then you know um Gwendolyn Christie got hyped up, and then she's got like and in both that's what is
Yeah,
frustrating about both movies. She's in
I
both of
agree.
them,
Yeah.
and it's just like you really did Boba Fett us again.
Did you need?
Like,
Yeah. Like, did you need Gwendolyn Christie for that?
yeah,
No, I agree with you. I mean, The Last Jedi has its flaws. Sure, every Star Wars movie has flaws.
yeah. I would.
But there was an interesting. Um, I think it was in Rolling Stone. They just interviewed J.J. Abrams, and someone was a little pointed about The Force Awakens, that it was just a rehash. There have been some comments from Bob Iger's book, Bob Iger, the former chairman of Disney, about Lucas saying that he was, frustrated with Force Awakens because it was just a rehash of A New
Yeah,
Hope.
I saw that interview today.
And I think that that's interesting for for a few reasons. One, you can make an argument pretty convincingly that the prequel series is sort of, especially the Phantom Menace, is a rehash sort of a New Hope. I mean, Lucas famously, when he was constructing the prequels, he was saying, Star Wars rhymes, things are cyclical.
Yeah.
There are scenes and characters and elements that reflect each other. Now, you can stop there and say, well, he was just looking at 6 films, so he never intended for a sequel trilogy to rhyme as much as JJ did. In fact, I think some of the people who complain about The Last Jedi would have been very surprised had Lucas actually made this sequel trilogy, because I think he would have incorporated a lot of those darker elements, a lot of those, these people were 30, 40 years older, and the galaxy has gone to shit again. So, I think some of the people out there who complain, need to remember that because Lucas, I don't want to say he got mad, but because he didn't think The Force Awakens took enough risks, he wasn't going to give them the original trilogy again.
Yeah.
He's going to do something different. Now, to defend JJ a little bit, and I'm not saying I agree with him here, but the reason he says that he did The Force Awakens as it was, and I think part of it was to pull you back in quickly.
Yeah.
You've had all these years of the prequels being derided. You had all these years of the cartoons and stuff. And so he instantly wanted to say, this is Star Wars. We're back to this, whatever. But the latest interview leading up to The Rise of Skywalker, he says, I didn't intend for the plot to be so similar to A New Hope. What I intended was for the characters to be reflections on the main cast. So I wanted Rey to be a Luke Skywalker. I wanted Poe to have those elements of Han Solo. I wanted all these people for you to instantly recognize that they were based on the original trilogy characters. And I also wanted to put them in a similar situation to how the original cast were put through the original trilogy. So in a lot of ways, he did intend for it to reflect a little more closely, because he thought those elements were Star Wars. Those were what made it great. And yes, I'm like you. I like The Last Jedi more than The Force Awakens, but I had a fucking fantastic time watching The Force Awakens at the theater. And I think, that's Star Wars too, to, make you sit there and enjoy yourself.
And the thing is too, that interview is great because I clicked on like a clickbaity one where it just came out that Lucas had criticized Abrams, and I read the article because I'm a fan of Star Wars, so like usually I'm like, I don't care, with other stuff like clickbaity stuff, but I read it and I hate when they take a snippet of something just to get you to click it, and I know that going into like when I click stuff now, like I know that's out of context, because JJ did listen to him. They actually sat down and talked about it, and have worked together since then. Like it was just it's not like he didn't listen, and I feel like we'll get a lot of their conversation thrown onto the screen in this next one, hopefully. I mean, but
I think you're right about that. He George, like you said earlier, George has assisted Favreau and Filoni on The Mandalorian in whatever capacity it has been. He talked to Ron Howard and was on set for Solo, and like you said, JJ sat down with him before writing 9 and saying, I want to bring, 9 intends to wrap up not just the sequel trilogy, but the whole 3 trilogies.
Yeah.
So you got to have George. You got to have George giving you some ideas, giving you some themes about the characters and the plot in order to, be able to really do a good job. And so, yeah, I know I'm like you. I'm happy with that. I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah, and I think another thing too is, who are these movies made for? I would say it's made for like a family audience. That's why you always get something like the Ewoks or even Chewie being goofy, or the robot, C-3PO and R2-D2 being goofy. And then, you get Jar Jar in the first one. Everyone, really hated Jar Jar, but it's like, it's nothing new. And then, like, everyone, you get the casino scene in The Last Jedi, but there's a scene like that in every single one of those. That one just sticks out like a sore thumb because that's the one everyone complains about. But watching these movies, it never took me out of the movie.
I mean, my thing about Star Wars is, this is, and I don't mean this with any criticism. You're not sitting there watching Citizen Kane. I mean,
yeah, no, and
Arabia, it's not intended to be that. I mean, these are again back to the Mandalorian. These are reflections of specific type of genre. And you might say, oh, well, Star Wars is sci-fi. Well, no, it's not. You might say it's fantasy. Well, it's not Lord of the Rings. It's serial, a serial like that were in the 30s and 40s and 50s that were just these crazy stories, crazy bad guys, crazy cliffhangers. You didn't know if the good guy was going to survive. At the end of the episode, he was hanging from a cliff, and then the next episode, he just found a way out.
Yeah.
But Star Wars is even beyond that because Lucas took, and we've talked about this on the podcast for about Game of Thrones and other things before.
Mm-hmm.
He took thousands of year-old storytelling, the hero's journey, all of these elements that have really been integral to storytelling in Western societies, and he infused it and he made it. That I think that's why people are so drawn to it, because it is a good story, but because there are these universal themes that are timeless. And it might not be the best acted, it might not be the best directed, but they're, like you said, a 95-year-old can sit down with his grandchildren and enjoy the fuck out of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's what it's intended to be. It's not intended to be this highbrow thing. You can definitely find those elements. Like, you can pull out, it's deep as fuck when Luke fights Vader in The Empire Strikes Back in the cave on Dagobah, and he, chops his head off, and then the mask blows open in Luke's face. I mean, what is that telling you? That's telling you that Luke could very easily go down a dark path like his father. Now, at that point, he doesn't know that that's his father. But, there are some very deep elements in Star Wars. So we can't wholly say this is just for children and, don't question it. But we also can't say this is Citizen Kane or Lawrence of Arabia or Chinatown, that it's got to be perfect. It's somewhere in between, and I think that's a good thing.
Well, and I feel like that's kind of what Marvel nails, too.
Yes.
And that's why I'm super happy about it. I mean, because when I think about Star Wars, I think about watching the original trilogy when I was like 4 and 5 years old, with my grandparents and my dad, and like we would sit in his living room. And then when episode 1 came out, my grandpa took me to see that. Episode 2 came out, my grandpa took me to see that in the theaters. Unfortunately, they moved out to Texas after that one, so there was a missed opportunity. But yeah, I mean it's just that's what I think about. Is like it it was made for me as a child, but it's also made for me as an adult. I could sit down and watch it. There's goofy stuff in it, but it's not it was never meant to be super dark. Like, and it could be. I mean, there are dark elements.
Oh yeah.
But like, I don't think that's for the main trilogy. I think that's maybe some spin-offs. Like Knights of the Old Republic, for instance. It's a little bit darker, like that game.
Yeah.
But it still has comedic elements into it. I mean, like, God, there's a robot, HK, I think it's HK-47, or I'm might be, it's been a while, but like, I mean, he's like an assassin robot, and he always calls whoever he's talking to a meat bag, and like, and he just has like these comedic things to it. So, but that series is a little darker. I guess that might be why I'm like pushing for that as an adult, but it's not so dark where it's the Bane, the Darth Bane storyline, which
right.
I would really freaking love, but that's it's I don't know, it's I don't think it was ever intended to get that dark. Now, if it does, it's fine. I'll be here every step of the way. But
one of the things that Lucas was specifically brought in for the Mandalorian was the child. One of the central. It starts off as the MacGuffin, which is a famous filmmaking technique, like used in Hitchcock movies and Indiana Jones movies. It's the object that people are after. The MacGuffin usually doesn't matter to the story. It does because it drives the plot and the characters, but usually there are other things that happen that take over for the story. But in this case, what you would think would be the MacGuffin in the beginning, though, the object turns out to be a really pivotal character, an alien race that we've only seen twice in Star Wars, and that being Yoda's race, or Yaddle.
Yaddle.
Yeah, Yaddle, whatever the fuck her name was. First of all, why do you think they chose a Yoda species? And do you think it is a clone of Yoda,
so
a child of Yoda, or just one of Yoda's species?
So I had a friend that I always talk Star Wars with, and he I had watched The Mandalorian instantly, but he finally watched it last week, and he was messaging me, and he goes, do you think that he goes, well, I think he asked me basically if I thought Yoda was a clone, because he put the, like, I don't know, he did some research, and I guess 50 years ago puts Yoda in Camino, which is interesting. And I didn't bother doing any of the research because it doesn't matter if it was 50 years ago. He did go to Camino. I mean, that was discussed, I think, in episode 2. Like he did. I think he, or no, I can't remember. But yeah,
he does. He leaves the when they find out that Obi-Wan is caught on Geonosis.
Yeah.
Yoda leaves Coruscant and goes to Camino to to get the clone army, and he's the one that arrives to save the Jedi. Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm thinking like, I feel like Yoda had such. There's a big backstory that's never told. Like it's never really discussed in the movies, but I think at the end of the first one, you see like this little orange alien that looks similar to Yoda, but not quite. It's not his species. Oh. And then in the second movie, you see Yaddle, and there's a big backstory where Yoda was constantly searching for his species. And it doesn't make sense that maybe he found... Because I'm pretty sure Yaddle died between... I'm not sure, but...
She was in the Phantom Menace as well. So she was in that same one. And I remember he's got like almost like a scarred eye or an eye patch or something. He's standing on the stage on Naboo after they've won.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember he's got the ears like Yoda, but he looks a little taller and he's definitely not green.
Yeah, like you could tell like he's definitely some sort of evolution,
Yeah.
They're in the same family.
Yoda's cousin.
Or something. Cousin. Yeah. But I just don't see that it could be Yoda's child. It makes way more sense in the Star Wars universe because cloning is such a big element of the extended universe, of the prequels. Palpatine, clones himself in younger versions and sends his life force into the younger version of his body. So right. I feel like it probably is a clone. And that's why I'm kind of coming to that. It would be cool if it, and I've been saying this a lot, like it would be cool if it's just a Yoda species. We don't know where this little baby Yoda came from. But it would be really funny if it was a clone of Yoda, and then people that are saying don't call it Baby Yoda, it's a Yoda species, when we all know that.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
So it would be kind of ironic if it was a clone of Yoda.
Yeah. So I land that it's one of Yoda's species, but I think the cloning element is definitely there because that Dr. Pershing, who's the mad scientist looking guy with the eyeglasses, on his right shoulder, there's a patch on his uniform that is the same symbol that the Kaminoans have.
I didn't catch that.
And yes. So if you go back and you watch episode 2, when they're showing all of the different Boba Fett young clones, they're like sitting in these cubes or orbs or whatever, and they're like with headsets on or whatever. They have this little symbol that kind of looks like a lowercase I with a dot and then an L, and he's got this on his shoulder. So that makes me think a couple things. That he's a cloner. He's into genetic experiments, genetic manipulation, something like that. That they want something to extract from this baby in order to do something, whether it's to create, creatures strong with the Force. Or to somehow extract the Force power. I don't know. If midichlorians still matter, can they extract that? Is Dr. Pershing an older version of the Boba Fett clone? That's just involved in some nefarious operation. I don't know, but I definitely think cloning is somewhere a part of this, and I think that I could almost see Favreau and Filoni specifically taking the 50 years because that's an important point, because when The Mandalorian goes out, everyone's sitting there thinking, okay, well, he's a 50-year bounty. Well, okay, this is some 50-year-old man with gray hair.
That's right,
in a hut somewhere. And then you pull it up and the Mandalorian's like, wait a minute, this thing's supposed to be 50
Yeah.
years old. Well, which obviously we know Yoda lived a very, very long time, so he could have aged very slowly.
Which he was like 900 years old.
He was
I think.
900 years old when he died. Yeah.
Which is funny. I had this thought too, like before I watched this episode. I always had this thought. I'm like, does Yoda, like, does it take him longer to hit like a teenager stage, and then like, you know? And I always had that thought, and I'm just, it like I watched this, and I'm like, oh, I'm so like you're
Yeah,
answering
so basically your teenage years are at 200,
yeah.
pretty much.
And I'm like, I wonder if he learns, and I had this thought too, because I think Yoda at one point in one of the movies says he's a slow learner, and I'm like, oh, you know, like, and that's I think what kind of sparked it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, so does he learn slower, but he's, you know, I don't know,
Right, right. So yeah, I kind of think that Favreau and Filoni went back and were like, you know, let's say this thing is 50 years old, and that'll fuck with the timeline, because then people will be like, oh, this is a clone of Yoda. This is when he was on Camino. This is, you know, right around the time that they discover Anakin, you know, whatever. Or Anakin Skywalker is a Jedi Knight. You know, this will really fuck with him. So, you know, and Palpatine's still around, and so maybe he did this and all that stuff. So I definitely think it has to do that. I think my next question, though, is how do you think this show is going to tie into the Rise of Skywalker? And I think the obvious thing, if it does, is this element of the Yoda species and the cloning and all that.
I think, I mean, with all the movies, they all kind of tie in. I think it's gonna steer clear of being like directly tied in. I think this show works best not being heavily tied in. And what I've thought about this show is I've watched all 3 episodes, and each episode has a beginning, a climax, and a resolution. So you could watch each of these episodes. Like, you could watch episode 3. I've only watched it once, so I can't speak on this. But I know you could watch episode 2 without watching episode 1 and dive right into it. You don't need to know that it's kind of explained throughout the episode. You can kind of, it's basically, they're short films, or
Right.
You could have released that one Mandalorian episode, and that would have been a whole arc of a short film, which is really cool, and I think it works best that way. And I really like the 30 minutes, and then that's it. You know, you're telling a story, you're getting in and out. Now all the stories are connected. They grow, but each episode has a plot that they're trying to get to and a resolution, which is awesome. And that's what I think really works right now for The Mandalorian, because if there's a bad episode, it's not a bad series the way they're doing it. It's not a bad movie. It's just one bad episode. And I really like how they're playing it a little safe doing that, but then also it's still way different and something new.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I really respect it. I don't know. And I've really enjoyed the first 3 episodes.
Yeah, I like the short. I mean, let's be honest. I'd love to have a full hour. I mean, who wouldn't want a full hour of content? But I think you get into the question of, they've done an excellent job of telling these stories in the 30, 35, 40 minutes that they've taken.
Yeah.
So, you know, and adding 20 more minutes, maybe they'd have a lot more great content in there as well. But, or would it just simply be filler that's really not necessary? So, you know, I mean, I get that some people are complaining about the 30 minutes, but I just don't think it's you know, they're telling a good story. So, I would be interested to see if it does tie into Rise of Skywalker, how they do it. I'm not going to say I don't want to see it because it really depends on how they handle it. But I would also be fine, like you, if it kind of just existed over here. But then, I think the biggest question is, how is Palpatine back?
Yeah.
And, the cloning is a huge potential, as is, some of the elements from the Star Wars cartoons where, some Sith objects are haunted or possessed or whatever.
And
So,
even the story of Plagueis, that from episode 3, he does talk about, bringing the ones, he had the ability to keep himself from dying. And if you take the legends into account, Palpatine, there's so many stories of him just transferring his life force into a clone. But then also, when did he do it? So he could come back as an old man because it's an old clone of himself, and maybe he's not as scarred up. Maybe he's just more in just he looks like the Chancellor again. Which I thought would be really cool. I think some stuff might tie into it, but it's going to be more of like the Mandalorian's going to set some rules, and then they're going to kind of play off that. Maybe not so much like characters from the which would be cool. I'm not saying it wouldn't be cool, but I feel like
I think there's a part where you're like, okay, that's cool. All right, the Mandalorian shows up. It's going to feel kind of awkward. Like, okay,
yeah.
Well, why wasn't he in the rest of the movies? And he just all of a sudden comes out of nowhere and stuff. Like, I don't mind. Like, I think that JJ in episode 9, you're going to have prequel elements, original elements, sequel elements. You're going to have cartoon elements, live show elements. You're going to have comic. You're going to have all these elements, but I don't think he's going to make them central. He's going to make them on the periphery. So you might see a ship. Oh, okay. Well, that's that type of ship there. Okay.
That's from Naboo.
Yeah. And you might have like, okay, well, this object was, important, but he's not going to make, it's going to be these things. He's going to use them. And the callback is going to be your mind going, oh, that was in issue number whatever of the comic, or that was in episode whatever of the Clone Wars. So yeah, I agree with you that I hope it does. It's not something that hits us over the head.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about something. I want to talk about the emotes that they're doing without showing the face, because
yeah.
And I want and one quick thing too before I get into that is the transitions. I noticed a straight up George Lucas transition where there's like the little bubble and it
the swipes.
And the Lucas swipes and all that, and like I was really getting a kick out of that, seeing that again.
Yeah, those are great.
Because I was like, this is Star Wars when I and just something that simple. But the way that they show emotion, like Baby Yoda's ears coming down, it's the stormtrooper cocking his head. Like when he goes in that room where all the stormtroopers are like really dirty, and you just see him. It's all very dog-like, and I feel like I feel like they took inspiration straight from Chewbacca, because Chewbacca is based off a dog, and Chewbacca does it. But when you see the stormtroopers do it, it's really like unsettling. Like where they twist their head, and there's just a lot of stuff that they're. I've noticed, and I think there was, I don't know if it was a reference to a dog, but I don't know. There's just like, if you go forward watching it, just think of a dog, and you can kind of see where,
especially Baby Yoda. I mean,
the ears.
If he's scared, if a dog is scared or nervous, its ears will kind of go back. If they're obviously interested, they're excited, their ears will sometimes go up. You're absolutely right. And there's a lot of elements from, especially the original trilogy with Vader, he emotes a lot behind that mask.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah.
I
True.
think I think the Mandalorian especially is doing a really good job, and a lot of that is the voice sometimes, which is used sparingly. I mean, he doesn't say a lot, so especially I like that the opening of episode 2 when, and if you go back and you watch it, you see the Trandoshans
The
jumping and you
shadows.
see shadows, but at first you don't really notice it,
Yeah.
but you can see it reflected on his helmet, and he's just kind of looking around, and he's like, okay, he's hearing something, he's scanning around, you can just see his eyes like darting back and forth, thinking, okay, what am I hearing, what am I seeing? Or I thought this was done really well, and I think um, that I just think the whole show's been done really well.
Yes.
The music is fucking amazing too.
That-
I mean, it's so good. That music is so good.
It is. It is. Yeah. It's amazing. And so I do have I do have a question, because I took
Okay.
a shit ton of notes for this. I don't think we'll bat through them all. But did you examine this show as a Star Wars episode or a Western once you kind of jumped into it? Like,
Mm,
because I feel like I jumped into it like, I mean, obviously it's a mix of both, but like, what does it feel more like to you? A Star
well,
Wars show or a Western?
I would say the latest episode feels more Star Wars.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I would say
Because
that.
of the Mandalorians flying around and stuff like that. And to be honest, I
But
I have
that's
never really cared for Mandalorians. Like they didn't interest me in the cartoons. I don't care about their clans and their wars and all that.
see,
Like, I actually, personally, before this show, I liked that Boba Fett was someone who wore Mandalorian armor, and the Mandalorians were like ancient warriors, and it was just kind of a cool element to his character.
yeah,
Um, that being said, I did like Sabine in Rebels. I thought she was an interesting character, but the cartoons again have never really done much for me. But this has made me a lot more interested. Like, I love that armorer, that
yes,
female Mandalorian. I think she's really cool. I like that in episode 1, it may or may not be Boba Fett in the background.
yeah,
Like, there's just, I think it's, and I think the especially where I think it's going with the fact that during the Clone Wars, the Trade Federation, this whatever, the Separatists destroyed Mandalore, and we got that latest scene of his parents. I presume his parents putting him in a bunker. And so, who saves him? Do the Mandalorians save him? Does a Jedi save him?
yeah.
What?
And
So it's making me a lot more interested in the Mandalorian
well,
culture.
I wonder if Yoda saved him. Like,
Could be.
but also like, wh- I I always liked Boba Fett growing up just because of the armor and
He was
stuff,
cool.
and the jetpack, and I understand like everyone's complaint, but then I kind of got into like like the the legends stuff, to where like you know like I never really read much of it, but like I would kind of like research it, and like how later on Boba Fett did start a Mandalorian clan, became Mandalore, and was the what is it, the Yuzon Vong? I don't know. Some
Yu Zong Vong, something
yeah,
like that. Yeah.
and like yeah, and him and the Mandalorians kind of help out in that storyline, and playing the Knights of the Old Republic, and I challenge you to play it. It's really not a super long game,
Mm-hmm.
but especially the first one, the whole conflict revolves. I mean, it causes a Jedi civil war, is what the conflict is. But the whole start of it was the way they fought. in something called the Mandalorian Wars, where the Mandalorians try to take over the galaxy, just as a power move, because that's just what they do when they think they're powerful enough that they want to conquer.
Right.
And
Yeah,
it's a warrior race type
never,
of thing.
Yeah, I've never played Knights of the. I may have played Knights of the Old Republic like in college, but I've watched. Sometimes like for games because I just don't play games anymore.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. Like I would love to just sit and play a game, but if you knew me as a kid, I used to get so frustrated at video games that. Anyways,
yeah.
But I've gone back and I've like watched some of the like material that is included in the games, and I've watched some of the stuff about the Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi and the Knights of the Old Republic, and it definitely seems interesting. And I hear you talk about it. I hear our friend Frank constantly talk about it. B-Fish talks about it. Everyone talks about it.
Yeah.
So I know it's something I would like.
I'm sure there's like gameplay.
I just see a cheat code because I don't like to lose at video games.
It's funny because it used to be like a really hard game for me to play, but there's so many like abilities that you can use, and like I used to just go in there and like hack and slash, and it's been a couple years since I've played it, but then I was like, oh, there's all this stuff that I can do to like, oh yeah, I can heal myself, and I can, without using, there's like med packs, and the game was super easy after I figured out like, oh, I can use all these different force powers. I don't have to just use my force powers to attack. I can heal my group. But anyways, there's probably some some gameplay footage that you could watch, like where it goes to like the cut scenes and the dialogue and
I've watched some of that before.
But I'm hoping they take elements, and it seems like they have. I don't have any like 1-to-1 comparisons, but from what I've seen of the Mandalorians in that game and from what I've seen now, it lines up. So
I'm trying to also think how. And I would need to go back and watch Rebels, the moments that they're on Mandalore there, or that they're involved with Mandalorians. But it seems like the Mandalorians in The Mandalorian are suffering from something called the Great Purge, when the Empire it was the Empire. Okay, that's right.
They wiped out the Jedi, is what the Great Purge was.
Who wiped out the Jedi?
The Order 66, I think, is what they were talking about.
Oh, you think it's referring to that? Okay, I thought that the Empire at some point wipes out Mandalore and scatters the Mandalorians, and then that's why it seems like they're kind of there are these tribes hiding together.
See, that's what's weird.
Part of the reason that one Mandalorian was like, "You're using this Beskar with an Imperial symbol on it,"
which is weird because that's the whole plot point of the first Knights of the Old Republic. There were the big war. I think they blew the planet up, and so like Malachor. Well, I don't know if Malachor 5 was their planet, but basically they had to like disband, and then in the second game you kind of meet the Mandalore, like the newly appointed Mandalore, which is the leader. And,
where they draw the name of their their society from, right?
Yeah, and you kind of work with him in the game, but it seems like that. I mean, that could be the case. I know that it seems like the Empire is mining the Beskar armor.
Yeah.
Which I wonder if Captain Phasma is wearing Beskar stormtrooper armor, because it looks similar.
Oh yeah.
And so the Empire, it seems like the Empire's mining that out. And
and when she's shot, I mean, the laser blasts just bounce off of her.
Yeah.
So I could see that. That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't even thought of that.
Yeah. That was just a weird thought, because I always wondered why it was chrome, and then like I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
that it's Beskar armor, and then yeah. So yeah.
So, last thoughts on the Mandalorian.
I always thought Yoda was vegan or vegetarian, but he is a straight up swamp monster. I mean, he's eating frogs.
I mean,
he's a Cajun.
he,
I mean,
he fucking served like 2-week-old soup to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back. He's like,
oh,
that
okay.
snake that you had to. No, I'm making a joke.
Oh, okay.
That he was, he's like, I'm just gonna give him this fucking root soup, make him eat this crap. That snake that he has to move, that Luke has to move out of the way. That was like Yoda's dinner.
Oh
He was
yeah.
just trying to get away.
Yeah.
He's gonna follow that shit.
But yeah, I thought it was funny because I was like in shock when that little guy ate the little frog thing. And what was a frog doing in the desert? Shouldn't it have been a toad? I'm confused.
Yeah, maybe it was that. Its version of, of toad. I love Quill or Quill, whatever his name, Nick Nolte's character, the I have spoken.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like one of my new favorite characters.
Yes.
And I just, if something happens to him, I'll fucking flip out. Same thing with Baby Yoda. Do not do anything to either of those.
Dude,
characters.
yeah, I was very frustrated with Pedro Pascal for giving Baby Yoda away for most of that episode. I was so I was like, what are you doing?
I was talking to Grant, to Heathen King, earlier today, and I couldn't get Disney Plus to work, and so I was frustrated. And he's like, "Yo, it's so good." So finally, I watched it, and I was like, "I got to go back and watch this again," because like I just sat through the whole time like freaked out about what was happening to Baby Yoda off screen, and I was like, "God damn it, go back for him quickly."
Yeah. The what was it, the blue guy in the first episode, God, what's that, not the actor, but the name,
Of the character,
not of the, it's a Mithril, I guess.
Mithril or something like
For
that.
some reason, that actor, every time he talked, it was very John Candy to me. Like he reminded me a lot of John Candy.
That's the actor was Horatio Sands from Saturday Night Live.
Okay, yeah, I swear, like his beats felt very John Candy to me.
Yeah.
Also, the introduction of the Foundling.
I
which,
found that.
Yeah, it's really cool, and then hearing him say that, it's more of a religion makes me think of like sort of, and I don't know much about Judaism, but it seems like there's the Judaism religion, and then there's actually a culture too of people, and I feel like that's what Mandalorians are. Like there is, you got your foundlings, but then you got the people who grew up. That's a question I have. That's a question I have. Like, is he actually? And the scene where his parents are putting him in the bunker. Some people were theorizing that it's going to be the Mandalorians that save him. Yeah,
and that's how he became Mandalorian. Some people are saying it's going to be a Jedi who saves him.
And that's I want to say that I think that's has something to do with Jango Fett's storyline. Like he was found, and I know it's recently came out that like he wasn't actually a Mandalorian. Like he was. I think he was saved or raised by him, and who knows whatever backstory it is now, because I think it's all legend. And I could be wrong, but I always felt like that's what I always saw the Mandalorians as, because I wanted Boba Fett to be a Mandalorian, like at heart at least. And even if he's not, this kind of, just knowing that you don't have to, it's not a race, and it's sort of like how there was a Sith race, but then the Sith we know are actually just dark Jedi. And that's what they're referred to as in the Knights of the Old Republic. is they're dark Jedi. They're taking like some of the beliefs and like some of the cultural aspects of Sith, and then it's kind of evolved into, oh, they are the Sith, even though they're not the race, the alien race of a Sith, which I
Right,
thought was
right.
really cool. And yeah, I don't know. I could like I have so much to say about Star Wars. I've been really wanting to do a Star Wars cast for a while, so I could
Well,
probably
maybe we'll do
yeah.
another one either right before the Rise of Skywalker or right after. Maybe we can talk about it.
I I do have one last closing thought though.
Okay.
The Jawas. I love that the whole Jawa episode, and I love the fact that Pedro Pascal had to fight the rhino that Jango Fett had to fight in the arena in episode 2.
Mm, yeah.
And then why is a rhino laying furry eggs? I mean, it's so Star Wars to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Absolutely. Star Wars. Yeah.
And the walking trash cans, the
Uh-huh.
little eyeball thing that comes out.
But like
It's like
so many.
it's like someone holding a microphone pole.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A
I like when he
stand.
ripped it off and the noise it made. It was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There's just so much. There's so much
So
there.
much, yeah. So yeah, let's do it. Let's just like a full blown Star Wars episode after Rise of Skywalker comes out, so we can talk about it and other things. Um, let's stay a little bit on Star Wars, but let's begin to transition to Game of Thrones news because David and Dan no longer with Star Wars. They're out.
Yeah.
They're not making a series of movies anymore.
Yeah.
I think it was very, very interesting, especially the timing of the announcement. And I think that could go a little back to what we talked about with Kevin Feige. Like, if he's stepping in and doing more with Star Wars, is he taking over Star Wars? You know, all these type of things. You know, is he wanting his people in place? Is he wanting, you know, to kind of put producers and writers and stuff in place for the next decades of Star Wars?
I feel like it came. It's weird because just that interview came out and there was a big backlash, and then like a week later or something, pretty quickly after they were leaving. I feel like that was sort of like I don't know. I mean, I'm just basing this off of like how it sounds to me, and take it with a grain of salt. But it feels like maybe they were kind of like the Disney and the all the higher ups there were kind of gave him a grace, like, look, we're going to part ways. We don't want you involved, but we're going to just say it like this. But I mean, who knows? It may have been, maybe they saw, they just, the thing is, I just wish Dan and Dave weren't so egotistical, because they come across very, very egotistical, even before like, like even before like the season finale, like I don't think that they're bad writers. I don't. I think that they're bad at coming up with original material. If they would go and look at like a book, like I feel like Dan and Dave might have done no, I'm not going to say it because it was pretty good, but and handled the women very well. But but I feel like they could take a popular book, and I feel like they know how to make it into a successful show or movie or whatever. I feel like they're just not very creative in the way of coming up with their own original thoughts. Because I was super excited to see what was the new Will Smith movie, Gemini Man. So I was super excited for that, and I go to watch it, and I'm like, Will Smith wasn't the problem with that movie. He was great. the CGI at the very end was the only time it pulled me out, when it was like super bright and like the CGI.
Uh,
But even I don't even care about that. The problem was I looked at the script and I'm like, oh, I forget which one of them did it, but one of them wrote it, and I'm like, I probably wouldn't have paid money to see this if.
if you had
And
known.
and I feel really bad saying that, but it's just because it was original material, by them. If you look at Game of Thrones as a whole, like where does it start to decline? It's when they start having to make stuff up. But like when they have all the stuff there for them, you get those extra scenes like Cersei and Robert talking, and
Right.
those are them, but it's
Time when I was just, flipping through, driving home today and listening to some music on random. And I was listening to the track Two Swords, the theme where Tywin, that scene where Tywin is having ice broken down into um, Oathkeeper and Widow's Well, and like
yeah,
that's a phenomenal scene that's not in the books. I mean, yeah, he
yeah,
talks about he had the sword, but I agree, I totally agree with you. I do not at all think that they're terrible writers, and some of the people out there that like to just harp on that aren't being honest with some of the great scenes and some of the great moments we got in the TV show that were better than some of the things in the books,
yeah,
or were different in a way.
yeah, and
You know,
that's what I mean. Like too is like if they've written the script, I'm going to be very hesitant. But if they're adapting, I'm and that's why I was
right.
still excited for them to be a part of the Star Wars universe. So, because there's material for them to grab, and not that they're I and it just and I feel like a lot of it is like a little bit of them. They're like hubris too. I felt like they got a little cocky, and maybe we might see some good stuff from them. Like
Yeah, I mean, I think that they, I, my personal thought, you know,
yeah.
here we are talking on a podcast. Uh,
I mean, that's what it's about. I mean,
it is, yeah, yeah. Everybody has a right to speak their mind, so I'm going to speak mine here.
yeah,
They could easily set themselves up as some mega producers in Hollywood, like having their name. You know, if you and I were writers and David and Dan put their name on our product and said, okay, we're going to help you sell it. We're going to help you put people together to create it. And, they could become like
yeah,
a mega producer, getting stuff done in Hollywood. And that would be
yeah,
great. Like they could I mean, they could make, obviously they've made a fortune already, but they could make tons and tons and tons of money and really give directors and creators and writers who need that exposure and need that help, need the name behind them. They could give them, they could create a production company that really blows things out of the water. I mean, just from the street cred that they got from with Game of Thrones.
yeah. And I feel like they know how to put together a movie. Like
Yep.
I just think they're the only thing that is going against them is I feel like they and I don't know them personally, but I feel like they have a little bit of an ego, and
Oh, sure. I mean,
and
even that interview, that was commenting about some of the stuff they said, and
yeah,
some of that stuff was discredited to an extent because the person was hyping it up, and some
yeah,
people went back and listened to it and said, that's not exactly how it was. But I would argue that some of the times the jokes and the things that David and Dan say, they're a bit effusive. They're making a joke in order to, cast people in a certain light or
yeah.
make fun of situations or whatever.
Well,
It's kind of like, someone smiling and saying, "I really hate you," or I didn't like this, or
well,
whatever.
it
And so I
it's
think that I think that they do have, you know, and you've watched other interviews where they're asked about things and they're dismissive of questions and stuff. So
What
I
well, it's like it kind of really started to dawn on me with the way they treated the actor who played Barristan Selmy, and like just kind of the way they
yeah,
handled that. They could have handled that situation a little bit better. I feel like they burned a bridge, and I'm not saying like they're super assholes. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just
right.
saying they feel like, you know, they made this big successful TV show, and I felt like at the end they were like, we could do no wrong, everyone loves it, and then, you know, it turns out a lot of people didn't like the last thing, and I'm and I the only that's just the thing. I feel like they have a little bit of an ego problem, and they're not great at coming up with their own, like they're not great at starting a story from scratch. Other
Especially
than
something
that,
as
they're
yeah,
great.
especially something intricate as this.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there are a lot of elements uh, at play in this story.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And
they got a huge deal from Netflix, and you know, let's face it, Netflix and Disney Plus are competitors now in the streaming wars.
well,
So I'm
I
go
heard
ahead.
Netflix is picking up the Nickelodeon cartoon shows, and I cannot wait for Rocket Power to be because I love that show growing up. But anyways,
Yeah, so I wouldn't discredit the fact that um you know their overall deal with Netflix had Disney thinking, you know, do we want folks that have, you know, a $200 million agreement with Netflix to produce content and make content, you know, also in Star Wars, in the Star Wars universe, creating content. So I'm sure that that's a little bit of it. I
yeah,
do think, you know, if you think back, you know, the announcement that they were going to be creating a Star Wars story came in February of 2018. And I think that that leads itself to some interesting timing because you and I have both said we like The Last Jedi, but let's face it, there was a lot of criticism of that film. The box office return for Solo wasn't that great. I mean, it was, you know, it made
uh,
$400 million.
I feel like the box office return for Solo though was a direct result of The Last Jedi because people didn't respond well to it. And then
I
because of that, I feel like Solo suffered more than it should. I know it's not a perfect film, and I know it's not like, you know, whatever, but it was still a decent film. It wasn't.
well, and I will agree with you that there were definitely some people not seeing Solo because of the reaction to The Last Jedi. I think a large portion of the reason Solo didn't land so well was it was only 3 months after The Last Jedi came out.
Yeah.
The marketing was very strange and wasn't that good, in my opinion. And I mean, I had some people say that they didn't even know the film was coming out. Like, and then other people were like, "Why are they making a movie of Han Solo?"
See, I was in that camp. I
Yeah,
didn't go to see Han Solo in theaters, so I'm
yeah,
guilty of this. And it's like I said, I mean, it's yeah, you know, it wasn't. I feel like they made some interesting choices
yeah.
because, but anyways, yeah,
Yeah, no. So what I was going to say is, you know, so David and Dan's announcement come in February 2018. That is still in the midst of a lot of the criticism of The Last Jedi. You know, whether you think it was huge or it was small or whatever, you know. So Disney's sitting there, they're hearing some of these complaints, right, about The Last Jedi.
yeah,
They make the announcement of David and Dan. Okay. Now, what was happening at that time in Game of Thrones? We just come off the ending of season 7,
yep,
which a lot of people had complaints about. And then we go into season 8. Again, just like The Last Jedi, you can say it was a lot of complaints. You can say it was a little complaints. You know, we don't have a statistical number to tell us exactly how many
yeah,
people were mad and whatever. Um, But the fact is, there was a lot of criticism leveled at season 8. Some of it that, we here talked about. Some of the
Yeah.
stuff we felt. So I wonder if Disney thought, oh my God, we got a lot of criticism about The Last Jedi. They got a lot of criticism about season 8 and the ending of Game of Thrones. Do we want more criticism potentially thrown at us? And potentially some of the folks watching season 8 could also say, I don't think they ended that very well. So do we really want them, again, doing something completely original? So I think that there's a lot of factors at play, but I'm not going to completely say it's something that was wholly their fault, but I also think that there's a lot of issues that also come with them. Baggage from Game of Thrones, baggage from their ability to adapt, Star Wars baggage of The Last Jedi, etc. So I just think it's an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I really think that it just looks so much like their ego has played a large role in it. Like if they didn't say certain things in interviews to make them look worse than maybe they are, maybe they're not actually that bad, but just the way that they kind of oh, we didn't know what we were doing. Like, maybe don't say that in a PR type of interview,
Right.
Especially with something controversial, because like if something's controversial and you say I knew it would be, and this is my direction, that's going to be like, people are going to accept that. But when you're like, we don't, something didn't quite stick the landing, and then you go, I didn't know what I was doing anyways. That looks a way worse. And kind of, it's just, I think there's talent there, and I don't want them to be pushed out, I mean,
right.
I hope they learn their lesson to where, look, maybe don't be, as douchey, and as lightly as I mean that. I feel like, yeah, if they, and maybe they missed the opportunity, and hopefully not, but I feel like if they went, they feel like, it feels like they could put together a team. Like they know, and it feels like they know how to choose actors. Like they have everything going for them. I just don't think they know how to write an original script and dialogue. They know how to look at dialogue and be like, okay, what if we added a little bit here? And I think that's fine. I'm not great at writing dialogue. That's my weakest point.
Right.
George Lucas wasn't great at writing dialogue.
Right.
George Lucas wasn't even great at directing or putting together. He's gotten better, but he wasn't great at a lot of things. And I feel like Dan and Dave, in the world of, I feel like they're getting more shit than they should be, but it's because they have an ego problem.
They don't help themselves.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
yeah. And I feel like that's, because and there's something to be said too, because I feel like George Lucas, he did have scripts written for episodes 7, 8, and 9, but after the prequels, he listened to too much criticism, and that discouraged him from continuing. And then I feel like Dan and Dave have the opposite problem, where they just don't care. And
they don't care. They don't listen.
I feel like there should be a middle ground. So which it might have been cool to see them in the Star Wars universe, especially if George Lucas worked with them, because they might have validated a lot of stuff that George Lucas wanted to do. And that might be reaching, but I don't know. I feel like they don't help themselves out, but I feel like,
yeah,
I feel like you know, I understand the hate they're getting, but at the same time, it really is sad to see that they're. It seems like they're stepping on their own foot when they're really not as bad as what people make them out to be. At the same
Yeah.
time,
Yeah, yeah. So let's transition to another big turn of events. This time solely in Game of Thrones world, and that is the fact that the Bloodmoon show is not moving forward at all.
which was
The pi-
surprising.
Very surprising. Yeah, I
Because
agree with you. It was extremely surprising.
didn't they build a whole set and do like
They
the
built
whole
sets, yes.
like a whole pilot, which
So
happens, but
so the story goes that um, the pilot was filmed. Some of the execs at HBO watched it over, I guess, the summer. They didn't really care for it. They ordered some reshoots, and they came back and they still didn't like the changes, and they decided not to go with it. Now, I think that brings up some interesting things because David and a lot of people in the fandom,
I've heard this. Yeah,
David and Dan, like 90% of the original pilot was reshot.
yeah.
So a lot of people were saying, now wait a minute, why did David and Dan get the ability to reshoot it and this person didn't? Well, the fact is they did get a chance to reshoot it. So you could say David and Dan reshoots worked, but this person's reshoots didn't. I'm not making a judgment about whether there's gender bias or white males get more of a chance to more of a second chance. I don't know. I can't see the material to compare them, so I can't.
Yeah.
I can't honestly make a judgment that it was solely based on gender and anything like that.
Did you hear this though? Because this kind of goes hand in hand with the Dave and Dan stepping on their own feet sort of thing that I was talking about, and them not help. Well, not just them not helping themselves out, but the way they ended the White Walker storyline, I've also heard could have been a big reason for this.
I think I think potentially that is definitely something that could absolutely affect it. Yes. So you've got the element of what they shot didn't really work.
And it could be.
It was also rumored not to be a good. The production just wasn't handled well. So
yeah,
it's according to Watchers on the Wall, there was a lot of infighting on set and
oh wow, that's
problems just making it. But let's not discount the fact that a lot of people walked away from season 8 saying that's what the White Walkers did. So some people might be like, well, why do I want to see a whole story about the truth about the White Walkers when I know the ending is going to be, 1 hour of a long night?
Yeah. Which I feel like it could be I think it's a combination of all those things, because I feel like making a show based on the long night after you see what we saw on season 8 is going to be very hard to engage an audience. But then also, if you have infighting and you have all these other elements at play, like, yeah, of course, this probably wasn't the show that we need to see and would have wanted. So
yeah, and some people, I also heard not the rumor. I heard the speculation that David and Dan specifically didn't do much with the White Walkers in season 8 because this show was going to deal more with the material. So the speculation that basically they took the gamble that, well, we don't need to tell you a bunch of this stuff. We just need to show you the climax of what they're doing.
Which
So
makes sense.
this show will tell you all that. I don't buy that. I mean, it does make sense, but again, I don't think
I don't buy.
anyone planned it out
Yeah,
that
I don't
efficiently
buy
and
it.
that effectively.
Yeah.
I think it comes down to a couple things. I think it comes down to the fact that this show, and I will agree that this show had a lot of really interesting potential because, one, you're reaching back thousands of years. You're going to show history and a world that we might think we know, but we really don't. So it was going to be fresh and new and interesting and, completely different political landscape or whatever. But I think right there is part of the reason they didn't choose it, because I think that if they're going to build a brand to go on, they've got to hook you instantly with a prequel. And so I think that's why they ended up going with House of the Dragon, that they needed something to give you to say, hey, you know that show that you fell in love with called Game of Thrones? Well, here it is, but it's 150 years before, 300 years before, whatever.
Which it kind of, I really want to see this. Like, I really want to see this show. It kind of worries me that it may not get the viewership it wants because of just how much they vilified Danny in that, the last 2 episodes, and now we're getting a whole series of Valyrians, and like I'm worried. I'm excited for it. I
I agree with you. I mean, you're going to have Targaryens at the height of their power.
Yeah.
With dragons doing some really awful things.
And
then you're going to have female Targaryens that get fucked over every chance that someone gets. I mean, one's going to get eaten. One's going to get pushed from a tower. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I am very excited about House of the Dragon. I will absolutely be there watching it. No question. But it's just such an interesting...
I know.
I don't know. I don't know how they're going to explain. And maybe they're like, we didn't create these characters and make their fate be I don't know.
Well, and but I think it's cool that George is involved in this too.
Yes.
And which makes me excited. And I don't care that he hasn't released this next book. T-Wow, it's fine. I would rather it be perfect than rushed. And we like, you can see that with the Game of Thrones season 8. Like, it didn't have to end. It didn't have to end there. It got rushed because they wanted to work on something else. And it's I don't mean to shit all over Dan and Dave, but I'm just saying, like, I'm glad that he's involved. I'm glad that the show is happening. I'm excited for more of this world. I'm excited for more Planetos. Okay, so I don't know. That's
where do you think? What time period do you think's gonna they're gonna go with?
So is this... See, I haven't really followed the production too much with this because I saw Bloodmoon got dropped, and then after that I heard House of the Dragon, and then I haven't... Like, I've been kind of scared to just follow it because I don't know.
They haven't really said. I mean, they didn't say, this is based on Dance of the Dragons. Now, in a blog post, George says, read The Princess and the Queen, read The Rogue Prince, read Fire and Blood. so some people are saying, well, that's obviously a clue that you need to go read the parts about Dance the Dragon. Well, I think he's,
I think he's
hyping up all his material.
Well, and I feel like George is so invested in the Targaryens, which makes me nervous too, because it's like he's made me love reading about the Targaryens with Fire and Blood. Like,
right.
Like I did not care that much about the Targaryens, except for Dany, because they were all like awful people, and like they had dragons, and like, and you saw Dany trying to be good, and it's like she's the only Targaryen I really care about, and then, but with the way her storyline concluded in the show, and then it just like, and then George obviously loves writing about the Targaryens, so.
Well, it's it's one of those things where, I mean, I'll disagree with you a little bit and say that I think that there are other Targaryens just as good as Dany, like Alysanne.
Well, yes, yeah, okay,
and I know,
yeah,
and
I
I
kind of
know,
glossed over, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
no, I know what you mean.
Yeah,
though the vast majority of them are pretty awful.
But that's what I'm saying is Fire and Blood made me come around on the Targaryens.
Right.
Because
but I will also say that even, and I've had this argument with people, and it pisses me off. Like, first of all, these are fictional characters, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like liking Stannis. Like, people are like, he's terrible. He's gonna burn. Yes, he's gonna burn. Okay. He's a fucking fictional character. I mean, I don't want him to do that, but I'm okay with reading tragedy. And I have the same argument with people about Daemon Targaryen. They're like, he is the worst. He's so terrible. I don't give a fucking shit. I fucking want to see him
well,
on
it's like
my
Darth
TV
Vader.
screen
I mean,
jumping. Right. Like, who...
He killed the younglings.
That was my... I didn't use Darth Vader, but like I was arguing with someone who was complaining about, I just don't want to see Daemon Targaryen. I'm like, you could bet my ass is going to be in the theater in December, like just eating up all of Palpatine. Give it to me. Who gives a shit?
Because
like, who cares? He's a great villain.
You know what's funny though? I'm going to sidetrack a little bit because I gush over any time I see Ian McDermott. I think.
Yeah. Ian McDermott.
Yeah, and because as him as Palpatine, because I've heard so many people say like he just loves being like on set, like playing the evil role. He just loves it, and it's just fun to watch him do that. And a lot of people like hate like the mustache twirling villain, but that's what he kind of is, and it's just like I eat it up every time I see him on screen as Sidious, and it's great. And but anyways, yeah,
but back to the serials. I mean, that's what these villains are designed to be. They're designed to be cool and mustache
suffering succotash.
So, I get that they're bad people, but come on, it's a story. Who gives a shit? Like,
yeah.
You don't need to lose your crap over, another bad Targaryen. Okay, yeah, well, too bad.
Well, and I think it strikes a nerve with a lot of people because most of what George R. R. Martin does is he writes very realistic people. So when they do those things, it's more of an impact than like when Palpatine does something evil.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Palpatine's more of like a fun bad guy who I just love watching on screen. And that actor, is just amazing in that role. I couldn't imagine anyone else doing Palpatine, but
absolutely.
But yeah, I feel like
that House of the Dragon has material to adapt.
Okay, yeah.
Back to our conversation about David and Dan, that the Game of Thrones was better when it was adapting material.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing about this that will be interesting is, yes, there's a lot of material to adapt, but they're going to have to really flesh out the characters. They're going to have to really add motivations to the characters. They're going to have to add some backstories to the characters. They're going to have to add dialogue.
Yeah.
So they've got a lot of original content they have to come up with, which is interesting. I mean, that frames it like we were talking about with Bloodmoon, that it was going to be something just we didn't expect. I think we know what to expect with House of the Dragon, but maybe we don't know what to expect with some of the characters.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm. Do they have a writer and director chosen?
So the showrunners are going to be Miguel Sapochnik,
Okay.
who
Yes.
obviously directed. Let's see, he directed Hard Home. He directed Battle of the Bastards, The Winds of Winter, The Long Night, and The Bells.
Yep.
So, some people were saying, well, I'm kind of concerned because some of those episodes lean awfully heavy into battles and, exposition and not character work. I agree with that. I think that this,
Yeah.
no, I think this gives me a lot of hope, though, that this is someone who's going to come away from his experience on Game of Thrones, and he's going to say, okay, well, I know what Game of Thrones looks like, so House of the Dragons will look very similar,
Yeah.
to Game of Thrones. I think I would also say to those people, Miguel Sapochnik was a director. And there's been a lot of directors who've walked away from Game of Thrones saying, well, I had different ideas sometimes, but sometimes those ideas were rejected by David and Dan. So I had to do what their vision was, because they're the producers, they're the creators, they're the writers.
Yeah.
So, I think that we don't have a fully fleshed out idea of what Miguel is what he can fully do, because he's been playing in someone else's world. So maybe this gives him a chance to be original on some things.
Yeah, and I think I think I have confidence in him.
Yeah.
As a director, because really, I mean, really directors, like when you're on set, I mean, he might have more pull, but in pre-production. But when you're on set, the director, his job is his or her job, or their job is to direct the actors. That's it. You're not doing the camera work. You're not doing the assistant director work of keeping schedules and making sure, important stuff gets done on time. Like your main focus is the actors. And I will say all those battle scenes that he's directed, all the episodes he's directed, I mean, not that he probably had to do much work, but the actors were fantastic. I mean, that was never a problem with Game of Thrones. The actors were never a problem. So I feel I have a lot of confidence in him as a director, doing that. Now, there's a lot of other stuff that comes into play, though. Yeah, the writing, and all of that, So I don't know. I'm happy that he's one of the showrunners.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right. Any other last thoughts about House of the Dragon?
No, I really haven't been keeping too much up with it, or haven't really been keeping up with it. I kind of wanted to be a little more pleasantly surprised. I might change, the more I hear about it. But I hope, I'm excited for it. I hope this one doesn't get dropped. and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. I feel like the world George has created deserves a world like Star Wars. I feel like they deserve as many chances to get it right as they can.
Yeah.
And whether I think it just needs the right production team to get the expansion. It's got to expand somewhere. So, and
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's what's happening with Star Wars. I don't think they really knew where they were going with it. And now you're bringing in Kevin Feige. I feel like it'd be cool if he got involved with a Game of Thrones. I don't know if he really needs to be involved with that, but anyways, yeah, I'm just babbling at this point. But yeah, so
Are you watching Watchmen? I forgot to ask you.
yes, and
Oh yeah,
uh,
I'm loving that. That's fucking
yes,
crazy.
yes, yeah, spoil. Okay, so you know what? This is the end of the episode. Spoilers for Watchmen if you don't want to hear it.
To watch.
But Ozymandias pulling the babies out of the lake and like they're like grapes or something. Like he's like, oh no, this one's not great. This one, and he's like tossing them back in.
It looked like little baby Voldemort.
Yeah,
I was like, what the fuck is
he is
going on?
yeah. No, I am thoroughly loving Watchmen, and I feel really bad because Alan Moore, the creator of Watchmen, is so against it. But it's like
well, he's just. I mean,
he got I know he got
screwed over by DC big time.
Yeah, and
so
that's why I feel bad, but for enjoying this as much as I do. And I've been watching Boars, Gore, and Swords because they're covering the Watchmen series, and it was funny because they covered the first one, and one of the hosts, Ivan, he wasn't going to do anymore. He just was going to cover the first one, and then got talked into watching the second one, and now he loves the show. And but it's just so funny because he started off like the first one is good, but I'm skeptical. So, and then it turned into now they're covering the whole series, and it's very enjoyable watching them or listening to them cover the series. And they keep up with the comics and stuff, or they don't. They've read the comics. I wouldn't say they keep up with comics in general, but so they have a lot of insight. And is a good listen if you are interested in any of the backstory behind Watchmen.
I've read the comic.
So you'll get a lot of stuff like I'm catching on. But like apparently there's like a pirate plot in the comics, and it seems like Ozymandias is kind of taking over that plot.
Yeah, that is the question of what the story within a story is. And going into it, some people were saying, well, it's that American hero story, that television show that's going on.
Yeah.
That dealt with the Minutemen from back in the 40s or 50s or whatever. But I agree. I think it's Ozymandias. And I think if you read the comic, the Black Freighter, the pirate story, which was a comic that a character in the Watchmen graphic novel is reading.
Oh, okay.
Reflects Ozymandias' storyline in the original graphic novel. So when the ending comes and then you see the ending of the Black Freighter, the pirate story, you realize, oh, these two just paralleled each other. Oh. So it's interesting that Ozymandias in the TV show would now become the pirate story that begins to reflect everything else that's happening in the story. Yeah. Because like I go ahead. No, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was. Oh, just really quick. Apparently, it's in Kansas, right? Um,
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. Okay,
Yeah.
but there. Okay, but anyways, there's the when the couple, the young couple that the the trillionaire was going to buy the
Oh yeah.
land.
Yeah.
Their last names are the Kents, and
Yeah.
then after it's bought, the thing lands, and it's like, okay, so you're telling us it's a it's Superman,
It's
that
basically
they're
it's
yeah.
basically a mixed up
Yeah,
Superman.
yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that they pointed that out, and I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
wasn't even paying attention to that,
Yeah.
like that, like I didn't know. I haven't known to pay attention like that.
Right.
Like it's not because it's not Game of Thrones, so I'm not like looking for those little Easter eggs and stuff for
Hmm.
and but
Yeah, I think
yeah,
that's
it's cool.
that's one of
Yeah.
the funnest things about Watchmen right now is all of these crazy Easter eggs and this crazy mythology and these crazy callbacks that you're like, oh, that's that, and that could be this, and this could be that, and yeah, that's what I'm really liking. Like I had read the Watchmen graphic novel back when I was maybe like 12 or 13,
Oh wow.
and I liked it, but I didn't really get it.
Yeah.
And I had a cousin who really got it and thought that it was like the best thing ever. And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's okay. But, I was like, I like Spider-Man more and
Yeah, yeah.
everything. And then when the movie came out, which came out about 10 years ago, I was like, I don't remember some of this stuff. And it definitely didn't look like this and stuff. I'm not saying the movie's bad. It's just a different experience. And so I went back and I didn't reread the comic at the time, but I just kind of looked through like what happened and thought, okay, those are the differences, etc. But leading up to this, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get the graphic novel. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna, because I want to be refreshed before the show starts. And I was just
Yeah.
like, holy shit, this is like this is saying a lot. This is a masterpiece.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, Red Scare is
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I kind of love him as a
I do too.
character.
Yeah,
Uh
yeah.
but he's like, I'm not a fascist, I'm a
I'm not a
communist.
fascist. I'm a communist. kicks the person.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. It's been very enjoyable. Like, and I'm really liking right now because, first of all, like the Mandalorian's dropping on Fridays. You have the Watchmen Sundays at 9 o'clock, and then you have Rick and Morty dropping at 11:30 or 11:30 on the same day. So I'm like, what? I'm keeping up with three TV shows, and then in in my spare time, I've got freaking Disney Plus. So I'm like, I've went through a bunch of the Marvel movies. And I'm
Spare
watching,
time, yeah.
yeah, and I'm watching like childhood movies that I'd forgotten about. And I never forgot about The Brave Little Toaster, but I'm just saying that is a great and really creepy movie. Not the one that goes to Mars. That's a stupid sequel, but the first one. But I mean, you can watch the sequel if you want the sequel. But I don't know. There's just so much on there.
Yeah.
And I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's crazy, the content.
Yeah.
I'm rewatching the X-Men cartoon from the early 90s. And,
I started those, yeah.
And Gargoyles.
Oh,
Those are some...
I want to, yeah.
Those are some really good... Like, I remembered the X-Men cartoon, like, vividly. Like, I used to watch that all the time. But Gargoyles, I was like, wow, this is really good storytelling for a cartoon.
Okay, that makes me want to... Because I used to watch the Gargoyles.
Yeah,
so,
it's really good. It's really, really good.
Yeah, I might dive into that.
Yeah.